Are you journeying through grief and needing a little extra support, inspiration, healing, and guidance? Join me in turning your losses into gains. Hi, my friend. I'm Tara Accardo, creator of the Losses Become Gains online community, blog, and now podcast. I'm an only child who lost both parents to cancer within 6 months of each other, followed by my sweet fur baby soon after. After all of this, I knew I was meant to do more with what I had been through. And now, that means supporting and empowering grievers just like you. I'm a wife, friend, grieving daughter, writer, course creator, loss advocate turned grief coach, and I'm here to support you and move you through your grief. I want for you to feel like I'm your friend in the grief space and know that whatever you're going through, there's someone out there who just gets it. Few topics are off limits here because grief and loss don't hold back either. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what all of this means for you, some coping tools, lifestyle topics, and impactful mindset shifts to take you from just surviving to thriving after loss. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and show up with an open heart and mind. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, and welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo. And to start wrapping up 2023 and to welcome 2024 with big open arms, I wanted to share 6 game changer level things that I learned this year. But I don't want this to be all about me and my learnings and how they've only affected me. These are things that I thought about very carefully, that I truly felt could apply to you as well, because I had you in mind as I was doing this self-reflection and creating this episode today. So simply put, your gain from this episode is to sit back and relax and dive into these 6 game-changing mindset shifts and realizations with me. My hope today is that these might resonate with you in some way and inspire you going into the new year as well. And listen, if nothing else, just to be something to walk away with and think about today. But I also want to mention that although this is a very griefy podcast, these are not all grief related. This is truly a more overarching, all-encompassing life after loss sort of deal that we're talking about today. And we are going to get into some griefy things here, of course, but I also really wanted to make this conversational and be just a little bigger and impactful for our everyday well-being and mental health and more in depth so you can really apply this to whatever is going on in your life right now or what might come up for you in the future. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So number 1, this one is definitely on the griefier side. And this actually is not something that I will say I learned just this year, but I wanted to mention this because it continues to surprise me. It continues to shock me. But at the same time, I have really felt a lot of mindset shifts and growth within myself when I come across situations like this. So just hang with me on this one. So this game-changing learning is that insensitive people and comments will continue to come, even years down the line after your loss. And it can still be shocking, as I said. Now, this might not be game-changing, okay? But let me give you some context here. So this point stemmed from something that actually happened to me very recently towards the end of this year. And I had someone that actually my mom knew. And if you follow me, by the way, on Instagram, you might have seen that I posted about this because I felt so passionately about it. But basically, their message to me was, I lost my mother, father, and brother. Don't tell me what pain is all about. I really know what it is. Time to let it go. You have to do the same thing. You are not the only one to lose someone. There's a lot of issues that I have with that message, and it really caught me off guard. It felt very unnecessary, very almost like she was kind of attacking me for something, which was so strange because she wasn't responding to any particular
post of mine or content, it just felt so out of the blue and very almost accusatory. And without breaking down every sentence in this message and going into it, like I mentioned, I did that on Instagram, and there was a lot of feedback on that one. A lot of people had a lot of opinions, rightfully so. A lot of outraged people, including myself. But really what I want to get at by bringing this up today is not to put this woman on blast. It's to go a step deeper here and explore why someone might say something like this and how we can then respond to it. There are a lot of complex people in our lives, in work, in our family, whether or not we can avoid them. There are also a lot of complex people on social media as well. And what it comes down to, that I have found, that I have learned really this year, is understanding that it's less about you, like it's less about us, and more about them and their experiences. Maybe it's things that they were, or probably in this case, weren't able to or allowed to work through. Maybe they come from a different generation or just a totally different upbringing. You know, I've talked about this in previous podcast episodes with, unmet expectations and grief around that. Maybe it's how they were raised or who they were raised by. Things that they're projecting. Maybe she did get triggered by something that I posted and it didn't sit well and it elicited that reaction. Maybe it's something that they are or need to work through, but they haven't even identified what that is yet. Maybe they don't know that internally, right? Consciously. And so there's that point. But another somewhat related note that I want to mention here is that regrieving is a real thing, no matter how many years have passed. And the reason I want to bring this up on sort of a related, unrelated note is that, maybe she's going through a difficult time, or maybe I'm going through a difficult time, but she didn't know that or understand that. And this regrieving process really needs to be acknowledged. And what do I mean by regrieving? It could be something big or even something minor coming up in our life that is bringing up a lot of the initial grief that we felt when, let's say, an event first happened. So, i.e., the death of a loved one. Maybe it's the day divorce papers were signed, right? Like, this doesn't have to be a death. This could be anything. And the thing about sort of re-grieving, not that we're ever sort of out of the grief process, so to speak, we can experience a lot of little, I'm going to say little deaths, any day of the week, every day. But with these bigger losses, I'll just call them bigger losses for the sake of this conversation, not everyone really understands or realizes this, right? That's why it can, that acute grief can feel so profound. And then we start working again, or, life goes on and we feel kind of stuck, or we're like, oh my God, everyone's moving on, but I'm still here. I'm still struggling with this, right? So people forget that sometimes. And it's something that is so individual to all of us and kind of has to happen in our own time. So for someone to, sit there, especially behind a computer, and have the audacity in a way to say things like that to us, or, like, you should be over it already, or you really need to move on. So in a way, it's this tricky balance, right? We kind of have to stay in our own lane in our grief in a way, but it's just a matter of seeing each other and holding that space. And sometimes there might be a time and place to say something, but sometimes not saying anything can be really beautiful too. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's not necessarily just staying silent and ignoring someone's grief or not acknowledging it, but it's just offering that, hey, here's a hand. I am here to hear you. I am here to listen to you. I am here to see you. And that in and of itself can be so impactful. Because grief it's a very collective thing, but it's also so personal and it doesn't obey timelines. So Anyway, if anyone is ever giving you flack or imposing opinions like this on you, remember what I just mentioned. This could be their projections. It could be things that they actually need to work through or wounds that they have that they haven't dealt with yet. We have no idea. We have no idea where any of this could be coming from. Even everything I just said could be conjecture, right? And honestly, I've come across people in my time that are very closed-minded. Their world is very small. Their empathy is seriously lacking. And that often doesn't happen for a reason. That is usually stemming from something. Now, I am not a psychologist or a psychoanalyst or anything like that. I don't want to dig too much into that. But if there's one thing I know, it's that. So all the more reason to surround yourself with good people. I have talked about this a little bit before, so I won't get into too much detail here on this particular episode, but I've had to phase away from people in my life, people that drained me, people that left me feeling empty, undervalued, those that lacked some empathy or more of a want for understanding me and where I had been through. But, while that's highly important, what I'm about to say next is also highly, highly important. That goes both ways. This is not a one-way street. We need to show up for people too, which has also been a big lesson for me in ways that I maybe have or haven't done that. And obviously, as we're grieving, especially if we're in the earlier stages and, or if we have some really deep grief that we're trying to work through, or that acute grief where it's super fresh and new, the scales might not be as even here. That ebbs and flows with life, of course. So disclaimer there. But the point is that we kind of have to realize it's not all about us. We're all here just living, just trying to enjoy life. But identifying toxic relationships or people in our life, and maybe they're not toxic, maybe that's not even the right word, but just looking at who we're surrounding ourselves with and making sure that they are adding value to our life, we are adding to them, that it's this beautiful synchronicity of love and support and understanding, or reevaluating those relationships and our interactions with them. All of that and more is definitely an important part of the process. And more than anything, it is imperative for our mental health because grief is tough enough, right? Other than having people around us that are, like I said, draining us or making us feel lesser than. We gotta find our people, so to speak, our tribe. But I also want to say here, and I really want to leave this point on a more positive note. People can surprise you in positive ways too, right? It's not all negative. We have to remember our grief doesn't get smaller. Your life, your soul, your happiness has the potential to get bigger. You create new memories that expand your experiences and your outlook of the world. You have to let that happen. You have to be open to that. But that is what can happen after loss. And having the right people around us that can uplift us and be there for us as we're doing this, that is so important. And especially when moments like the holidays, right, that just passed, or anniversaries, or whatever it is that come along and our grief is all we can feel again, I want to make this clear. It's not because we're moving backward in our healing. It's not because there's something wrong or that there's something wrong with us or that we're not capable. It's because this is a complex process that can take us a few steps back sometimes. Or, it can certainly feel that way, even if that's not what's actually happening. But I want to just encourage you, the intensity of our grief, it's not going to last forever. There are going to be moments where it is more intense than others. Of course, like I said, there's an ebb and flow. But you will continue to find color and vibrancy and peace and happiness beyond your grief. I want you to remember that today. But this is also why it can feel very overwhelming to make new decisions this time of year, or, think about maybe walking away from people that haven't been the best influence on us. There can be sort of a comfort in that, even though we know it's not the healthiest thing for us, that relationship, that person, whatever. And outside of any relationships, we're told to set new goals for the year while we might be in the middle of feeling the weight of perhaps some unexpected pain or some grief that's kind of cropping up again. And we can get discouraged because it can feel like this will go on forever and it's never going to stop and it's exhausting. But this is where we can take a beat and just pause. We can take a breath, we can rest, and we can release expectations on others and also ourselves and just be. And I have an episode coming up where we're going to talk about setting intentions and having sort of a word for the year. I'm really excited about this. Again, it's this beautiful balance of allowing the peace, allowing the rest, allowing us to just sit with our grief, but also, as I'm always saying, taking those healthy baby steps every single day, however we can. That collectively will open us up and expand our mind and expand our life. So with that all being said, just to close out point one, I think this is a good segue into point number 2 here. It is okay to create big, exciting things, and it's also okay to slow down. This has been a big learning for me this year. It is all about balance. This year, for me personally, was a very, very busy one. That a lot of that was very self-inflicted. It was busy with work. It was busy with things I was building and creating for Losses Become Gains. I went through 2 different certifications this year, one of which I've talked about this a little on the podcast before, was to become a soul purpose and spiritual life coach. And that was a very eye-opening and very expansive experience and has only benefited me as a coach. But one of the things that we talked about in this program was Ayurveda, which, if you are not familiar, is a traditional medical system of India. And Ayurveda has delineated 3 categories of fundamental principles of the body, mind, and behavior. So what exactly is this? I have a point, I promise. So these 3 categories, they are overarching called doshas. And these 3 doshas are named Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So why do I bring these up? Let's talk about them really quick. So Vata, which is this air energy, is when we might be going through an ideation phase. Something is kind of weighing on us, or we get this idea. This is very much how Losses Become Gains came to me. I received this download. That's another aspect of this Vata energy. We might receive a download or, something kind of calling to us a little bit. Maybe we're brainstorming, we're tapping into some creativity. There's some big picture thinking going on. There's drafting, envisioning. It's this beautiful ideation creation phase. Okay, so that's Vata. Next is this Pitta energy. This is this fire energy. This is the get up and go. So it's the execution phase of something, taking action, creation, the actual act of creating, delivery, doing, fine tuning, getting feedback. There's a lot of energy with this Pitta phase. And then there is Kapha. This is more earth energy. So this is sort of a reevaluation phase. There is this sacred pause, which, if you're not kind of familiar with this sacred pause, it is a moment where we stop and release our identification with problems and reactions that we're having to things. So it's just a moment where you do not need to speak or fix or achieve or resist or run away from something, but simply just watch and observe what is going on around you, what is coming to you in this phase. And this kapha phase is also a lot about reflection, rest, recovering, kind of just mulling things over and again, seeing what comes up for you. So the important thing to remember is we don't want to be in any one of these phases for too long. And how this ties in with grief is we can often get kind of stuck in one of these phases. So for example, with this, I'll say like the pitta phase, that energy phase of, the going and doing, a lot of us can get really stuck in that because we are distracting or we're trying to avoid something. So we might be keeping busy with work, trying to keep busy with our family, just whatever project we can kind of throw at ourselves to perhaps not deal with our grief, whether we're doing this consciously or unconsciously, or this is happening in our subconscious. Or maybe we are kind of more in this kapha phase a little bit where we're kind of maybe dragging our feet a little bit. And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? Grief can really take a lot of energy from us. We need this phase. We need the rest, the relaxation. We need to be able to take a step back and just, breathe, take stock of what has happened to us or to someone we love and how it is now affecting our life. But it's really important that we, again, don't stay in any one of these sort of phases, these places too long. So for example, if you stay in that vata phase, that kind of ideation phase for too long, you might never get an idea that you have off the ground because you're too busy. It's like you're kind of stuck in the planning and not really taking action on it, right? Meanwhile, if you're stuck in the pitta for too long, this action phase, you're probably going to burn out. And I've definitely experienced some of that this year. This has been a tough balance for me. But conversely, if we stay in that last phase, that kapha phase too long, you'll perhaps feel too low energy to really start anything. And then you can never really, get it off the ground to like make these positive changes for yourself. Those baby steps I'm always preaching, even those don't happen. So this is something, this entire framework and so much more are things that I cover more in my one-on-one coaching and the Intentional Life After Loss membership. And you can find information on both of those in the show notes. But high level, you still might be wondering, okay, what does this mean, Tara? Why do I have to move through these stages, one through the other? Why is this important? When it comes to really just living a life after loss, what I want to communicate here is that it's important that we allow this flow to really come in and out of our lives for a few reasons. So for example, if you are going, let's say from this, like the vata to the pitta stage, right? A question we might want to ask ourselves is if you have 1 year left to live, which, listen, if you know grief, if you have seen some grief, if you've seen a loss of a loved one, you know that this could be a reality. What would you focus on? Think about that for a moment. And then from there, we find ways to take those actions. Now, if we are kind of in this pitta phase, that go get 'em, go, action focused phase, and we want to kind of transition ourselves into the kapha to slow down, to relish in what we have created and what we have done, a question we might want to ask ourselves is, how can we relax? How can you create more time and space for you, for your peace, your harmony, your rest? And lastly, if we want to move from this kapha phase to the vata, really starting to create these beautiful things for ourselves, this is one of my favorite questions. What are your dreams? What are your dreams? And this can be a tough question to answer. And again, I want to say here, if you are coming off a new loss or you're kind of re-grieving something, like I said, or you're going through some stuff right now, take this with a grain of salt for the moment, maybe come back to this, but asking ourselves the right questions to really elicit, like, okay, what step can I now take to take some action for me? give that some thought. What is it that you really want? And you want to visualize for yourself? What do you want to manifest? And then from there, it's turning those thoughts into actions. And whether or not we even realize it, and again, you don't need to put too much thought into this because we naturally move through each of these phases throughout our lives. We are not one or the other. We should and need to give ourselves space to do this. We need to experience all three a lot, all the time. And I just want to say here, you can't do it all, nor should you have to. I struggle with this. I am a person who takes a lot on. I just talked about this in a recent post on Instagram, that especially as an only child, as someone who has lost both parents, I have really felt the need to take on more than I probably ever should. And that can lead to burnout, and that has happened to me. So for me, this was the year of giving myself grace and actually learning how to do that. And I just want to mention here too, I think a lot of the listeners here are women, but I just want to acknowledge this for any women listening, or perhaps any men listening that have some women in your life. Women especially are experiencing burnout like never before. You might be seeing a lot of new year, new you messaging. This podcast episode is coming at the end of a year and on the cusp of a new one, right? I want to elicit a little inspiration here. But there could be a good chance that your feelings of overwhelm and, of course, your grief could actually be burning you out or contributing to some sense of burnout. We often don't realize that, or that our grief can actually be a very main contributor to that. So as much as a new year can be very exciting, and we might feel the need to get a jump on it and plan big and plan ahead and all the things, which I'm not going to lie to you, a part of me does love doing, the little type A part of me. But what we sometimes need is to not get a jump on the new year. Like, you might just need to rest. You might need to just allow space and time for your grief to be seen, to allow for some stillness, to take a breath. And you are so deserving of that, right? Especially towards the end of the year, our brain might just be fried. We are exhausted, but we're often being told that doing more is what will help us. I have fallen into this trap. And again, I want to preface it like with the previous episode, with this episode, the next one that I'm releasing next week, there are definitely some action items or things you can try. And that's my job, right? As a coach, I want to inspire, I want to give you tools, but this all has to be in alignment with what feels good to you, what feels empowering to you. And only you really knows what that is. So, doing a vision board, as I mentioned in the previous episode, and giving ourselves something to be excited for, that's a beautiful practice. And I stand by that wholeheartedly. But equally important is doing things that are in line with what your soul needs right here, right now. And like I said, only you know what that is for you. And we can be told to do self-care and take care of yourself. And you're even going to hear that from me, which I am here for. And I encourage and I try to give you tools and resources to do that. But the thing about self-care is sometimes it is not enough when we are carrying this load, this invisible load of our grief. So I want to take this opportunity to just address this really quickly and acknowledge that it is perfectly okay, as you might be hopefully getting inspired or maybe thinking about some things that you want to, manifest for yourself next year or whatever. It's just as okay to take your foot off the gas too. Maybe do a little of both, right? Maybe step into that kapha phase that I mentioned, but also have some fun thinking about things that you want to try, that you want to do. If you haven't heard about my Intentional Life After Loss membership and community yet, if you're listening to this podcast, this is truly something that you need to check out. Because the goal with Intentional Life After Loss is to provide you a deeper, more meaningful, and healed life after experiencing loss. This takes intentionality, community, the right tools and mindset, and prioritizing you. Through this membership, I help you integrate the lessons and practices shared through our monthly content into your life. And we do this through live coaching calls and Q&As, actionable tools and exercises that you can download and do at your leisure, video and audio content, and coming together as a community. Because remember, it's not about getting over it and moving on. It's about trusting yourself, trusting the process, and growing around your grief and giving yourself grace as you move forward. Your grief doesn't get smaller, but your life does get bigger. You create new memories that expand your experiences and view on the world. And that's exactly what we're doing here together in this membership. I want for you to imagine how amazing this next phase of your life can be for yourself. And I want for you to get excited about that. So check out the details. It's all linked in the show notes, and I hope to see you there. I was actually speaking with a fellow coach and a dear friend recently, and I just wanted to bring her up because she was telling me that she was feeling a bit spread thin, a little bit drained, and she, as a coach herself, she had the most beautiful mindset around it. But what she did is, instead of like beating herself up for that or wondering why it was happening or whatever, she honored that. And in allowing herself to do that and allowing herself to take the foot off the gas and cutting out some of the noise from everything else and everyone else and all of these other outside influences that we might have in our personal life or on social media or whatever, she came back to herself a little bit. And let me tell you, new opportunities came to her because of that. Some things that she didn't even think about exploring, or something that never would have come if she didn't give herself that opportunity. So, think about this for yourself. Maybe you're feeling just overwhelming exhaustion that maybe even disrupts your daily activities or your work or your time with your family. Maybe you're feeling some shame over something. Maybe you are comparing yourself to someone. Maybe there is some guilt that you're experiencing, be that around your grief, maybe around parenting. Like, I am especially looking at you moms with some mom guilt. I'm seeing a lot of that online lately. So I just want to give you lots of love if this is you right now. Maybe you are emotionally distancing yourself from people or certain situations. Maybe you're feeling a little short-tempered, feeling isolated and just a bit disconnected. Maybe you are experiencing some mental fatigue or a little lack of creativity. There's a loss of enjoyment with different activities. Your mood is kind of low. I could keep going on, right? So if any of what I just said resonated with you and you're just like, yeah, Tara, that sounds like me, what do I do? So high level, some things that can help with this other than just general self-care is, focusing on one task at a time. We've talked about this more in the previous episode. Go check that out if you haven't already. But, again, breaking things down into more manageable, bite-sized pieces can really, really help with this. Number 2, ask for help. This has been such a lesson for me. I am not someone that likes asking for help. I don't like imposing on people, but for real, whether it's your partner, whether it's someone to watch the kids, whatever this looks like for you, allow yourself that help. Allow yourself to accept that help. Find connection with others. This is why I created my membership and community towards the end of the year. This is exactly what I wanted. I wanted people to feel, supported and like they had other people that could really see them and hear them, not only around the holidays, but especially going into a new year. Try doing one thing each day to help you relax, whether that is meditation, breath work, getting out for a walk. I talk about those and so much more all the time. However this looks to you, just whatever you can do. Find one thing you're grateful for in each day. Find one highlight in your day, each and every day. Have a very honest conversation with your partner or people around you about how you are actually doing and what you're feeling, and feel confident in owning that. And if you don't have anybody in your immediate life, right, there are so many resources. There are grief groups. There are other self-help groups. There are Facebook groups. There's, the Losses Become Gains community. Like I said, my membership, that's what it's for. It is so possible for you to find the right group of people for you out there. I just want to encourage that. And lastly, finding clarity on the direction that you want to be moving in. We're going to talk about this more in next week's episode, but that's why I love doing reflections at the end of the year, much like we're doing here, but that's really what next episode covers, because there can be so much that can come to the surface for us when we give ourselves the time to do this. It's amazing. It is so eye-opening, and you never know what doors this could open for you. Number 3 here, and this is almost a little bit related as well, but focus on doing one thing and doing it really well versus trying to spread yourself too thin. Something I've learned this year is this is a really valuable thing to be able to do. Honestly, this is actually kind of a skill. And I sort of just alluded to this, but I mean this more holistically too. As someone with an entrepreneurial spirit and mind, it's kind of the way I work. We can want to do all the things. I really struggled with this with Losses Become Gains this year. There's a million things I want to do with it. It's all very exciting. And that's great. And I think it's amazing to be motivated like that. But sometimes when we're always going, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but we don't appreciate what we have done. This can lead to a lot of burnout. And sometimes things can not only lead to burnout, but when we spread ourselves too thin, we might not to really get to any of it because we end up overwhelming ourselves and then nothing really gets done. Or, it might be a little bit half-baked and it's not really full of our most beautiful, high-quality work because we're just trying to do it all. And there was an expression I heard earlier this year where you can't be pregnant with multiple projects or things at once, right? Like you have to sort of focus in and give birth to one thing at a time. And so you also might have heard the expression, it's better to be great at one thing than it is to be good at many things. So all of this to say, it's a tricky balance because there is so much beauty in being a multi-passionate being and wanting to do a bunch of different things and trying new things and having outlets and the creativity to do that. That's amazing. So I will never discourage that, especially if you have discovered something exciting and beautiful that lights you up after experiencing a difficult loss, like more power to you. But again, like I was saying a moment ago, it sometimes teeters into that half-baked territory, or it's not as well thought out or executed as it could be. So it's really just remembering, again, you are one person. Whether it's taking care of your family or it's a project at work or whatever, sometimes it's just too much, especially if you are dealing with the heaviness of grief. It is okay not to feel the need to do it all or just simply not be able to, and just own that proudly. Or for it to take a little more time and a little more patience to get there. And again, more importantly, I'm going to say this again, asking for help. Outsourcing is great. If that's an option for you, I hope you explore that. But what I mean here, what I'm really trying to get at is what is within you. Because when you become great at one thing and you can really hone in and put true quality and thought into that, you're going to discover new opportunities that you never knew existed because you're allowing yourself the chance to do that. And I also want to say, as I just mentioned, we often don't take the time to celebrate the things that we do. And I've talked a little bit about this already, but I just want to say it again. We have to acknowledge those things. If you haven't done this yet this year, I want you to do this right now, or at some opportune time, at least if you're driving or something like that. It's okay. But do this at some point between now and the end of this year. Close your eyes, take that pause we've been talking about, and think about what you have done this year. And if you feel like you haven't done anything, or you're just scraping by because your grief has been intense and overwhelming, know that that is okay too. Acknowledge that you've been having a difficult time, and acknowledge the fact that you've continued showing up in any way you were able to, and in any way that you have this year. I want you to give yourself some well-deserved credit here, because that, just the showing up for ourselves and for others, that can be some of the toughest work we ever do, especially in that acute grief when we are really feeling it. That can be some of the most emotionally taxing and exhausting. And we don't often feel like we're doing much or doing enough, but in reality, we are doing everything we can physically and mentally, and that deserves to be recognized. So wherever you are today, wherever you're at, whatever circumstances and adversity life has thrown at you this year and any previous year before this, pause this episode if you need to, and give yourself the opportunity to do that. Give yourself that gift. Number 4 in this list of things that I've learned this year: cut out the noise and listen to your gut. Y'all, this is something I am still working on. We are so inundated with information, suggestions, recommendations, stimuli, especially on social media. We have to take a step back and cut that out sometimes and get back in touch with literally what thoughts are ours versus another person's. And more importantly, what feels aligned and right for us. If something doesn't feel like a big, beautiful hell yes for you, it's probably a no. Or it's not even just a maybe. It's like, no, if this really doesn't feel aligned, if this really doesn't feel genuine to you, then it is perhaps very likely not for you. And speaking of being genuine, this is also a very important lesson in being as genuine as possible. And I mean that in the way that we come off to ourselves and to other people in this world. What do I mean by that? I see people all the time on social media selling. And listen, as a coach, I have my programs, I have things. I'm going to be selling sometimes too, right? We're all here. We all might have our little hustles, even though I kind of cringe whenever I hear the word hustle now. But we all have things that we want to serve to the world, right? That we want to share with people. That's okay. Much respect. What I mean here is you can tell when it is lacking heart behind it, or that there's like a little bit of desperation behind it. And you can tell when it feels slimy and a little too sales driven, and they're not coming from a place of genuinely believing in what they're offering. Like it's that classic, like it sounds like a used car salesman a little bit. And just to use this as an example, I follow a lot of very successful entrepreneurs. I often find them very inspiring. A lot of their content really speaks to me. I find it interesting. I have a background in marketing, so I follow a lot of kind of marketing specific entrepreneurs who perhaps work in digital marketing, or they sell courses, or, whatever it is that they sell. And it always feels like a hustle. in some capacity. And while they might make really great, engaging content, you kind of lose the why behind it. And I kind of catch myself wondering, like, why are they so passionate about this? Why is this important to them? I'm not feeling that. I'm not hearing that. I'm not sensing that anymore. Why is what this person is selling going to make a difference in someone's life? How will it make a difference? How will it transform someone's life? Sometimes I've realized this about myself. I'm like, I'm almost too focused on the benefits and what people are going to get. But it's like, what is the transformation then, really? Where is the heart? What is the why behind it? So I think it's always so important to come back to our why. So I encourage you to think about this today. What is your why? And I know this is kind of funny saying this in the same sentence as not trying to be salesy, but I'm just going to mention in my Losses Become Gains daily journal, I purposefully start with this question at the beginning of the journal before you even get into the daily prompts, because that's what you're going to come back to when times get tough. Your why. Your why is your motivation and is what is going to keep you going. So when we cut out the noise and listen to our gut, as I mentioned in the first part of this point, that's what we're doing here. We are pushing everything else to the side for a moment, remembering that we are our own person, our own soul, our own being with our own thoughts and feelings and ideas. Aside from being perhaps a partner or a parent or sibling or whatever other titles we hold, we are here first. And if you're not watching this on video, I am pointing to my heart right now. We can listen to others. We can glean so much amazing inspiration and information from others. I mean, that is literally the purpose of this podcast, right? And what I hope you experience here too. But it's okay to take breaks from that. It's okay to kind of do little detoxes. We have to sometimes. Getting back in touch with who we are at our core, aside from anything or anyone that we've lost, aside from anything that has happened this year or in previous years, and not forgetting any of that, right? It's making it a part of who we are now and our story. But coming outside of all of that for a moment and acknowledging how it has affected us, remembering who you are, and giving that person the love and the attention that you so deserve. So again, if you have not done that yet this year, I encourage you to do this ASAP. It is a very important practice, and we all deserve that self-love. Number 5, take the time to invest in yourself and your growth, your healing, and your education. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter and sweeter point, but I think it's a good one to remember. Invest in yourself. And I don't necessarily mean a huge financial commitment here either, right? So hear me out on this one really quick. This can be as simple but impactful as a book that perhaps inspires you, a podcast just like this one, perhaps a course or a class where maybe there's like a little bit of a financial output required, but you just know in your gut that it is going to change things for you. Or if nothing else, it's just of interest to you. Maybe it's learning a language or something, right? Maybe it is exploring getting a certification or something cool that will further your growth and development. Maybe it ends up in a career change. You have no idea. But I really implore you to use this opportunity to explore things that light you up and that feel juicy and feel good, and see where that takes you. Get curious about it and kind of who you are now. And listen, it might take you nowhere, but it could also be somewhere greater than you could have possibly imagined. I never thought I would get into the grief space. Obviously, I have said this before, but because I opened myself up to it, it has led me in the greatest directions I could possibly express to you. And I'll be very transparent. I have invested more in myself and my self-development and my education this year than I ever have before in my entire life. So my grief coaching certification, my soul purpose and spiritual life coaching certification. I did a Speak with Soul program with Sahara Rose earlier this year, a grief writing course with 2 renowned authors in the grief space. That was amazing and was so cool. Starting this podcast was a little bit of an investment, but was hands down the most well worth it money I have ever spent on getting this going. So I can, of course, further support and guide you. And that lights me up. That means something to me to be able to do that. Like, this podcast has changed my life, and I know it's going to continue to change my life and broaden my horizons and connect me with even more amazing people. And that you really cannot put a price on, honestly. I've also done a program on how to create digital courses to hopefully bring you something really impactful and incredible next year that I have on my mind. I literally just invested in a manifestation challenge for 21 days that begins on the 1st of the year, like just the other day. I just followed the flow with all of these things. They came into my life. I sat with them. I gave it some thought. I gave it some attention. And I was like, yep, this feels right. I'm going with it. And there were plenty of things too that did not feel aligned. So whatever this is for you, whether it's investing in your healing, your business, your education, your development, be open to what comes to you, and also take the action of taking a moment and maybe thinking about something that might resonate with you and light you up. And if nothing comes to mind, don't worry about it. Don't put that pressure on yourself, because like I said, simply being open, you never know what could come into your orbit. And that, I really hope, sounds exciting to you at the end of the day, because that is such a gift, especially if we have gone through some devastating loss. So finally, last but not least, number 6, breathe and release. I have mentioned breathing probably no less than 5 times in this episode alone, but I don't care. I don't think I can adequately describe how important this is. Between work calls and meetings and family stresses and all the things, we can hold so much tension, not only just in our minds, but like this can show up physically in our shoulders, our neck, and other various parts of our body. Taking a walk, for example, and not just going on a walk for the sake of walking because you know you need to get out of the house or you're trying to lose weight or anything like that, but really just being and enjoying that fresh air. And typically on walks, I will listen to music or a podcast or something like that. But there are times where I will make sure that I maybe just pause it or turn it off for a little bit and just listen to my feet on the pavement or the soccer game that I might be passing or the birds chirping, like really being present and taking in everything around you. Meditation, talk about this all the time. That's another great way to add a little more presence and relaxation into your life. And remember, with meditation, it is not about turning your brain off. There is no pressure to do that. That is not the point. It is, in fact, to allow overwhelming thoughts or things that might be kind of swirling around in your head to come in, give them the time and the attention that they deserve and that they need, and to let it go. And to do that practice over and over and over again. For example, also, if you're working out, making sure that you're not holding your breath, that you're not clenching, that you're not kind of tense, but you're really breathing through it, making sure your muscles are getting that oxygen that they need, making a concerted effort to really hone in on that breath and release it. And especially remember this, going into a new year. As I've said, we can only control our own thoughts and actions. Those insensitive comments I mentioned earlier are grief avoidant, often tone deaf society. We can work to make change for ourselves and for this collective But that starts with us and our own actions and thoughts and words. It's how we treat other people, but more importantly, it is how we treat and honor ourselves. So if there is anything that I've walked away with this year, in addition to everything I've said previously in this episode, it's that. It's holding space for ourselves, it is holding space for others, and it is how we honor ourselves and others. So much power, so much transformation, and so much of our happiness and peace, it is all within our hands. And I am certainly here to help you along with this process, as is this podcast. But again, there are truly so many resources out there for you. If you need more help with this, I am always here if you need recommendations or further help. My DMs, my inbox is always welcome to you. You can just simply email hello@lossesbecomegains.com. I never for a second want you to feel alone in this process or that you have to tackle any of this by yourself. So with that all being said, I truly, genuinely hope this episode uplifted you just a little bit, if nothing else, going into this new year and gave you some things to think about. I cannot believe we are so close to the end of 2023. I am sending so much love your way as we close out this year, this chapter in our lives, so to speak. And if you did enjoy today's chat or anything that you have heard here on the podcast so far this year, I would truly, truly appreciate a comment or a review on whatever platform you're listening on so I can help reach more ears of those who need it. I hope you have a beautiful new year, my friend. Remember to give yourself all of the grace in the world going into this new year. Take those breaths, take that pause, take the pressure off, do things that inspire you, do what feels good, and know that everything is going to be okay. And I will be back just after the first of the year with a brand new episode to get you going on the right foot. So with that, I will see you in 2024. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps that you're taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, to learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog and for more coping tools. Explore my Grief Becomes Gains online course if you need some extra grief support and coaching. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your story, and supporting you however I can. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.